There is a truth that makes many people uncomfortable to hear. Those who truly prepare almost never reveal everything they store in their homes. Not because of selfishness, and not to appear mysterious, but because they have already seen what happens when familiar stability suddenly disappears. You remember 2020, do you not? In just a few hours, rice vanished from the shelves, dried beans followed, and canned goods were cleared out before sunset. People did not panic because they lacked food immediately. They panicked because they realized how quickly the system could stop working. But there is a detail few people notice. While familiar items were bought out, there were still things sitting quietly on the shelves for many days. No one touched them. No one mentioned them. No one thought they were important. And those overlooked items were exactly what kept people alive the longest when the crisis dragged on. Today, you will see 12 foods that even the prepper community rarely speaks about openly online. And the reason for their silence matters more than you think. Because in a real crisis, what disappears first is not food, but your choices. I will say one very cold thing directly. In a real crisis, people do not die when food runs out. People die on the day they no longer want to eat. And that day usually arrives sooner than anyone expects. 1. Pure MSG. It may sound strange to begin a survival list with something that is only a layer of white powder resting quietly in a small jar. MSG. For many decades, it has been associated with all kinds of fears, such as headaches, rapid heartbeat, or health dangers. Stories repeated so often that people avoid it out of habit, without even remembering why they were afraid. But try placing yourself in a very ordinary evening. The power has just gone out. The kitchen is lit only by faint light from the window, and in that quiet house you are alone. In front of you is a bowl of white rice and a little reheated beans from yesterday. The sound of a spoon lightly touching the bowl is clearer than usual. Nothing is truly missing, yet nothing makes you want to eat. And that moment is what is truly frightening. During prolonged periods of instability, people rarely collapse because of lacking calories first. They collapse when they slowly lose the desire to continue living like a normal day. This is especially true for those who have passed the age of 50, when appetite gradually fades with the years, when the body slows down, and when each unfinished meal is not just a small matter, but tomorrow quietly growing weaker. Just a very small pinch of MSG does not make the meal luxurious. It only makes you still want to take a few more spoonfuls. But sometimes, in a real crisis, whether you still want to eat or not, is the line between continuing to endure and silently letting go. MSG is so inexpensive that it is almost invisible. A small packet costing a few dollars can sit quietly in a corner of the kitchen for many years without anyone noticing. And because of old fears from the past, it is often the thing left on the shelf after familiar choices have disappeared. Survival rarely lies in expensive items. It lies in very small details that keep the body and spirit from slipping at the same time. There is a cold truth that very few people dare to say directly. People do not die because food runs out first. They die when they no longer have a reason to keep eating. When that happens, hunger is no longer in the stomach. It is in a much deeper place. The place that decides whether you still want to live another day. Preparation, therefore, is not always about storing a lot. Sometimes it is simply keeping one very small thing that helps you still sit at the table, finish your meal, and quietly pass through one more day without collapsing halfway. And if an ordinary day suddenly slows down, the most important question may not be how much food you still have, but whether in that quiet house you still have enough reason to take one more spoonful. Preparation is not to survive, but to avoid living as if you are surviving. 2. Beef fat tallow. The modern world teaches us to avoid fat. Eat less of it. Choose something lighter. Live cleaner. But the survival history of humanity tells a completely different story. Expeditions in frozen regions did not live on salad or whole grain bread. They lived on fat. When temperatures drop deeply, the body does not need lightness. It needs a dense source of energy strong enough to keep warmth inside. Imagine a winter morning without a heating system. The room grows cold slowly, without noise, just enough for you to notice that your hands are no longer as flexible as before. On the stove is a small pan where a layer of fat melts very slowly. Not a luxurious meal, just something that once helped people pass through long winters before electricity, before supermarkets, before choice. 1 ounce of tallow contains the amount of calories that sometimes requires an entire bowl of rice to obtain. More importantly, it is a slow, burning form of energy that keeps the body warm for a long time, instead of flaring up and fading like sugar or starch. For someone who has passed the age of 50, a lingering feeling of cold is not only discomfort. It is a quiet sign that internal reserves are gradually running out. Something youth once had in abundance, but time never returns. In the comment section of an older viewer, someone shared that they render their own fat, make ghee, can meat, and even still eat food stored for more than 15 years without spoilage. Not to boast about preparation, only to prove one very quiet truth. Old methods are sometimes more durable than the new world. And there is a cold truth that few people want to say directly. In prolonged cold, what kills people is not the temperature outside, but the moment the body no longer has enough energy to keep itself warm. When that happens, no matter how strong the will is, it becomes fragile. The irony is that the cheapest part at the meat counter, the thing many people overlook, may be what keeps you standing the longest. Survival rarely lies in what is new or glamorous. It lies in what is quiet, durable, and repeated across generations without needing to be named. And when the body is still warm enough, the spirit usually has not collapsed yet. In truly difficult days, sometimes what keeps you going is not extraordinary strength, but only a small source of energy, steady enough that tomorrow can still begin again, slowly, but still moving forward. 3. Hardtack. Hardtack is almost not a food. It is more like a promise sent toward the future. Only flour, water, and salt, baked until it becomes dry and hard as stone. Not soft, not delicious, nothing to look forward to. Yet in war, on ships crossing the ocean, and in journeys lasting for months across many centuries, it was always there when everything else had spoiled. Imagine an old ship cabin at night. Wood creaks softly with the rhythm of the waves. No fresh vegetables remain, no meat remains, no choices remain. Only the hard, dry biscuits that must be soaked in water before they can be bitten. No one calls it a meal, but everyone understands one simple truth. As long as hardtack remains, the journey is not over. There is a truth that youth rarely considers. When young, people can begin again many times. If they fail, they try again. If they lose something, they find it again. The time ahead is still wide, but when stepping into the second half of life, what becomes frightening is no longer failure, but not having enough time to try one more time. And sometimes that feeling arrives very quietly, in mornings that seem ordinary like any other. Hardtack lasts a very long time, not because it is delicious, but because it almost never changes. As years pass, it still lies there, silent, waiting until it is needed. In real survival, the most valuable thing is rarely comfort. The most valuable thing is the number of days you can still extend before being forced to stop. One viewer once wrote that hardtack is not meant to be eaten immediately, but to know that there is still a tomorrow in reserve. That small sentence touches something much deeper. People do not fear scarcity as much as being pushed to the final point. And perhaps the quietest question lies here. In the second half of life, what do you still keep only to know that tomorrow is not over yet? The true value of hardtack does not lie in the hard, dry biscuit, but in the silent time it preserves for you. Because sometimes, at the final stretch of a human life, the most precious thing is not beginning a new journey, but simply still having enough time to move a little more slowly before having to stop. 4. Lard stored at room temperature. A box of lard looks very ordinary at first glance, even a little outdated, like something left over from a kitchen of a distant time. But in the harshest circumstances, that very ordinariness becomes the greatest advantage. Survival rarely belongs to what is glamorous. It belongs to what quietly accomplishes many tasks without needing attention. Lard can cook food when oil is gone. It can keep a small lamp burning in a dark room. It can become soap, so the body remains clean in scarcity. And more importantly, it carries dense energy, enough for the body not to surrender too early. During the Great Depression in the United States in the 1930s, many families had almost nothing left except flour, a little sugar, and a jar of saved fat. There were no luxurious choices, no rich menu, but as long as that jar of fat remained on the shelf, they still knew they could cook something warm for tomorrow. And sometimes, that small hope was enough for a family to pass through another winter. The pioneers crossing the continent carried something similar. Not because they preferred roughness, but because they understood a very simple truth. When everything collapses, what remains is not comfort, but the ability to take care of oneself. In the second half of life, fear is sometimes no longer about lacking money or food. It is the moment you realize you must manage on your own longer than expected. On days like that, the value of an object does not lie in how modern it looks, but in whether it helps you continue living without depending on anyone else. Therefore, the true meaning of lard does not lie in the fat itself. It lies in the very quiet self-reliance it represents. A reminder that even when the world becomes unstable, there are still small ways to keep life from falling completely into chaos. And perhaps the deeper truth is this. In a real crisis, what keeps people standing the longest is often not the most expensive thing, but what continues to function normally when everything else has stopped. 5. Canned fish roe. One of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet is something most Americans have never tried: fish roe. Omega-3, vitamin D, and concentrated protein do not only nourish the body, but also keep the mind clear enough to continue thinking. Because in prolonged crisis, people rarely collapse from lack of calories first. They collapse when the mind slows down, and small decisions gradually become large mistakes. Medical journals from polar expeditions once recorded that when rations lacked fat, disorientation appeared before true hunger. Not because the body weakened too quickly, but because they were no longer clear-headed enough to choose the correct path back. That is what makes this small container different. Not its size or flavor, but its ability to keep thinking clear when everything around begins to fade. In a normal world, it is only a forgotten food sitting on the international shelf. But in weeks when meals become nothing more than repeating starch, its true value does not lie in luxury, but in the clarity that remains. Because sometimes what determines whether you reach the end of the journey is not how much food you carry, but whether you are still clear-headed enough to choose the right direction before night falls. And when everything becomes unpredictable, the most important question may not be what you can eat today, but whether tomorrow you will still be lucid enough to keep moving forward. What do you think matters more, being a little fuller or still having enough clarity to know where to go next? 6. Whole dried corn kernels. There is a type of food that once sustained entire families during the harshest periods of American history. Yet today, almost no one thinks about it. Whole dried corn kernels. Not the neatly packaged kind in supermarkets, just hard, rough kernels often found in the animal feed section or in the hidden corners of agricultural stores. But that very simplicity is what allows it to last so long. When stored properly, these kernels can keep for more than 10 years, can be ground into flour, cooked until soft, or sprouted into fresh food when winter stretches on. During the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, when drought swept away crops and money disappeared almost after a single season of dust-filled winds, many families survived almost entirely on dried corn. Not because they liked it, but because it was what remained at the very end when the kitchen shelves were empty and no other choices existed. Diaries of those who survived that time rarely spoke about the taste of meals. They only mentioned that there was still something left to cook for tomorrow. There is something modern life makes us forget. Abundance is not the default state of the world, but only a short interval between harsher cycles. True survival rarely begins with complicated things. It begins with what is simple, durable, and patient enough to wait with you through hardship. And sometimes, what carries a family through the winter is not a large system or modern technology, but only a sack of dry kernels resting quietly in the corner of the kitchen, silent enough to be forgotten until the day it becomes the only thing left. Because when all other choices gradually disappear, the true value of food no longer lies in flavor or convenience, but in a very simple question. Do you still have something to cook tomorrow? And if history has repeated itself more times than we would like to remember, then perhaps the most important thing to consider is not whether the world will change, but when abundance ends, what you still keep that is durable enough to wait until everything begins again. Sometimes the hope of an entire winter begins only with a small seed. And you, in your kitchen today, what have you kept that is simple enough, yet durable enough, so you do not have to begin again from nothing? 7. Fermented black beans. In prolonged crisis, people do not always lack calories. Often, they only lack a reason to keep eating. Fermented black beans do not look appealing. Their flavor is strong, unfamiliar to many in the West. But with just a small spoonful, they can turn an entire pot of plain rice into something with depth of taste. And sometimes, as long as a meal still has a little flavor, a person still has enough strength to sit with life for one more day. There are very quiet evenings in homes that still have enough food. An older person sits before a bowl of rice gone cold, holding chopsticks for a long time but unable to take another bite. Not because nothing remains in the kitchen, but because the feeling of wanting to eat has already disappeared. The most dangerous weakening sometimes does not come from scarcity, but from the silent fading of the body that even the person living through it does not fully notice. Fermented beans carry natural beneficial bacteria, helping the digestive system continue working when a poor diet stretches on. But their true value does not lie in nutrition, but in the ability to keep a meal still holding a trace of life. Enough for flavor to awaken the desire to eat again, and keep the rhythm of living from going completely dark. A small jar costing only a few dollars can season dozens of meals, yet sometimes what it preserves is not tonight's dinner, but the strength to keep walking tomorrow. Because in the hardest periods, what keeps a person connected to life is rarely the amount of food they have, but whether they still want to take one more spoonful. And there are very small moments, almost unnoticed, when a meal left unfinished becomes the first sign that the body is quietly stepping away from life. Sometimes, the most fragile line between continuing to live and silently weakening is separated by nothing more than a single meal someone still wants to finish. 8. Black garlic crisis rarely begins with an explosion. It usually begins with prolonged fatigue, poor sleep, inadequate nutrition, stress accumulating day after day. When that happens, the immune system weakens before you even realize it, and illness appears faster than usual. Black garlic is not a cure. It is simply regular garlic slowly fermented with heat, increasing certain antioxidant compounds such as S-allylcysteine, helping reduce mild inflammation and support the immune system. Under stable living conditions, this effect may not be very noticeable, but during extended periods of sleep deprivation, poor nutrition, and stress, in other words, the exact conditions of crisis, maintaining a stable immune foundation becomes important. Another practical point. Black garlic is easier to eat than raw garlic. It is not sharply spicy, causes less stomach irritation, and can be used daily in small amounts. This is especially important for older adults because they need something that can be maintained long-term, not something that is beneficial but cannot be used consistently. In addition, black garlic can be stored for many months at room temperature, requiring no refrigeration and no cooking. In a scenario of power loss or supply disruption, this is a very practical advantage. To be direct, black garlic will not prevent hunger, and it does not replace medicine. But in long-term survival, the danger is not only lack of food, it is becoming ill when full medical care is no longer available. The true role of black garlic lies there, helping the body gain a little more resilience, even if only a small part. Survival, therefore, is not only about stockpiling calories. Survival is keeping the body healthy enough to wait until the difficult period passes. And in a prolonged crisis, what determines the outcome is not how much food you have, but whether your body still has enough strength to wait until stability returns. 9. Canned pork. There is a very simple reason preppers rarely talk about canned pork. Not because it is useless, but because it is too ordinary. In a world of expensive survival packs and precisely calculated military rations, a can of meat that can be opened and eaten immediately does not sound impressive enough to mention. But real crisis does not care about impressions. It asks a much colder question. Does your body still have enough strength or not? During prolonged power outages, when cooking becomes a luxury, the most valuable thing is not complex food that requires long preparation, but real protein that can be eaten immediately. Canned meat exists for that exact moment. The sound of a lid opening is very small, yet sometimes it is the sound of your body still having a chance to keep functioning for one more day. Preppers do not talk much about it because it does not carry the appearance of professional survival. But real-life survival rarely looks professional. It is usually just the simple things left behind after everything elaborate has disappeared. Preppers do not talk much about it because it does not carry the appearance of professional survival. But real-life survival rarely looks professional. It is usually just the simple things left behind after everything elaborate has disappeared. And in a prolonged crisis, you are not searching for a perfect meal. You are only searching for something that keeps your body from collapsing today. 10. Malted milk powder. There is a truth many people do not want to consider when preparing for crisis. The problem is not always the lack of food. Sometimes the problem is that the body no longer has enough strength to eat the way it once did. Prolonged fatigue, broken sleep, and quiet stress can change how the body receives energy faster than we expect. Malted milk powder was never created for the strong. It was created for the weakest moments, when the body needs recovery, when the stomach cannot tolerate solid food, when energy must arrive quickly and gently. That is why the survival community rarely mentions it. No one likes preparing for a weaker version of themselves. But long-term crisis does not ask who you want to be. It only slowly takes away strength until the most important thing is no longer a perfect food list, but the one thing the body can still absorb. In that moment, a cup of powder mixed with warm water is no longer a simple drink. It becomes a very thin line between continuing to endure and beginning to decline. At a certain point, survival is no longer about what you have to eat, but what your body can still absorb. 11. Canned butter. Stable fat is something rarely mentioned in long-term preparation, not because it is unimportant, but because it is so simple that people often overlook it. The human body does not need only calories to survive. It needs a source of energy durable enough not to collapse in the middle of long days without the chance to recover. When fat drops too low, weakness does not arrive loudly. It appears in lingering cold, slowed thinking, and strength quietly leaving the body little by little. Canned butter can last for many years without refrigeration, which is why it once traveled with polar expeditions, where winter does not allow a second attempt. For older adults, prolonged loss of energy is not only fatigue, but the loss of the ability to stay warm, reduced alertness, and an increased risk of quiet exhaustion. A small can of butter cannot change a crisis, but in the longest days, it can extend the time before the body has to collapse today. And that is exactly why few people talk about it. Not because it is rare, but because it touches a truth too directly about human weakness. In long-term survival, sometimes the most valuable thing is not a special food, but simply a source of energy durable enough to keep you standing for one more day. When energy gradually runs out, weakness does not happen loudly. It only makes you feel cold longer, think more slowly, and grow weaker little by little without anyone noticing. 12. Canned cheese. The final item on this list is not the most nutritious, nor the cheapest, but it carries a value that no ingredient label can measure. It is the feeling that familiar daily life still exists in the middle of days when everything around begins to change. People rarely collapse immediately from hunger. They collapse when meals lose their familiar flavor, the kitchen becomes silent, and the rhythm of normal life disappears little by little. A real piece of cheese cannot save a crisis, but it reminds the body that the life from before has not completely left you. For those who live alone, that feeling is not small. Sometimes it is the line between continuing to eat regularly and quietly skipping meals without anyone noticing. In long-term survival, the greatest danger is not the lack of food, but the moment you no longer want to live as before. True collapse rarely begins from the outside. It begins very quietly from within a person. Long-term survival does not kill people with the first hunger. It kills them on the day they no longer want to continue living as before. On the day the kitchen still has food, but no one wants to sit at the table anymore. These foods are not special because they are rare. They are special because they are still there when everything else has disappeared. Preparation is not living in fear, but simply reducing surprise when life suddenly changes. When things that were once very normal suddenly become uncertain. You do not need to buy everything, and you do not need to do everything today. Just ask yourself one very simple question. If the supermarket stopped operating for a few days, what in your home would run out first? That answer, not this list, is where real preparation truly begins. If this video made you think, leave a comment below. Not to argue, only to see how many people are still quietly preparing before it is too late. And if you find this content useful, share it with someone you truly care about. There is no need to post it publicly. Just send it to them privately. Because in uncertain times, the most valuable thing is not food, but the people who remain beside you when everything changes. Thank you for staying until the end of the video. And remember one very simple thing. The best time to prepare was yesterday. The second best time is today.